The green fire sank back into the black water like a dying eye, leaving only wreaths of steam and the stench of pitch and salt and roasted leather. Davos Seaworth clung to a splintered spar, his palms raw under the brine and the blood, and blinked through lashes salted stiff. All around him the bay coughed up wreckage, oars, shattered yards, a dead gull bobbing as if surprised by its death. The chain Tyrion Lannister had yoked across the mouth of the river lay slack and jagged beneath the surface, as if a giant had dragged its knuckles in the deeps and given it up. The river's current tugged, sullen and insistent, toward the city and its low walls and red rock above, where in the last light of day a ragged line of antlers and crowned stags had been flung against stone. Davos tasted smoke and ash and something sweet, sickening, that he knew was burned flesh. "Edric," he croaked, though his youngest boy had been taken from him by the green kiss, and no answer would ever come. A wave rolled him and his splinter together. He locked crook of elbow and knee around it and kicked, the old smuggler's rhythm remembered by muscles that did not care about kings. He thought, while he let the water carry him, of the low caves under Storm's End where the tide boomed like a great, slow drum, and of his wife's hands smelling of onions and soaps. The thought was pain, and it kept him awake. A beam thudded past, trailing a length of rope. Davos flung his free arm, caught once, missed, caught again, got rope across his wrist and seized it hard enough to feel tendons crack. He let the river do the pulling then, and did not look when something with hair brushed his leg. The city's harbor arms reached around him like stone hooks. Prows jutted from the quays. The masts of ships not yet burned pricked the last of the light. He drifted past a half-submerged galley whose name had been scorched to a twist of iron. Something Florent, something proud. He promised the dead ship's master a prayer when he had breath for it. Two men in a shabby skiff were working oars near the pilings and calling hoarsely, "Antlers! Antlers! This way! For King Stannis!" Davos raised his fist and a voice near lost in the wind. The skiff rocked toward him on a turning wave. A hook snagged his rope and tugged. He let himself be hauled until the skiff's plank thumped his throat. Hands, hard and quick, grabbed collar and beard and ear alike and dragged. He came up from the water like a netted fish, snorted out slime, and lay on his side heaving, while the two men bent over him, wiry, dirty, caps pinned with tin prongs. "Onion Knight," one said, breathless with relief or fear. "7 keep you, sir. We thought you dead." "Lawler keep him," said the other. They were both wrong, Davos thought. The sea had kept him for her own until she was done. He found his voice. "The king. In the city," the first man said, already bending to his oar. "We saw the mud gate opened. The hound fled. The gold cloaks ran. He's in the city." The city. Davos set his back to the skiff stern and helped them pull. The oars made a sound like breath in a throat. Patches of ash still floated out there, drifting like spent snow. He thought again of his boys and cannot remember later whether tears leaked from smoke or grief, only that the salt was on his lips when the skiff nosed up along a weed-greened ladder and his hands found stone. They left him at the steps. "We've friends to fish," one said. "The antler men open King's Gate from within, they say. There's fighting still in Flea Bottom. Gods help em that get caught between the fires. Tell them Davos Seaworth lives," Davos said, and knew it was foolish. No one would be made living by his living. He climbed, knees paling under the press of stone, and came into a world of iron and shouting. A cart lay overturned. A horse, its mane singed, screamed and then dropped to its knees. Over the rooftops the red keep shouldered up, all angles and rampart and pale scars of old siege. Davos could taste more fire in the air, sour and rapacious as an empty mouth. He set out toward the hill and the palace of kings, clutching the numb idea that duty was a rope, too, and you held it or you drowned. Stannis Baratheon's jaw had become a hinge of iron. He could feel the pressure in it as he gave the order to pull down the door of Maegor's holdfast, each splintering thud jumping into his teeth. His helmet had a line across the brow where a mace had kissed it. It made the world a little crooked. Smoke moved on the wind in pale lines like gauze. Somewhere a woman screamed. somewhere a man begged. The sound mattered no more than the whine of gulls. Men held a court within their skulls. Cries were a weather outside. "Your Grace," Axel Florence said, cindered hair stuck to his sweating cheeks. "If we give them the mother's mercy now, they'll call you clement as well as rightful. Scratch a city and you make it bleed years. The Queen's men say the sept can be sanctified before dawn. If Stannis did not turn to look. He watched the ram. Even from here he could feel the timbers shudder against the great bronze-bound door. Say the if you'll let the Red Priestess set her fires there. The great September is a hive of idolaters. Lawless light will burn, Stannis said, and felt the iron in his jaw again. My lord, I took this city. I did not take leave of my wits. Tell the Queen's men to keep to their prayers. Axel flushed the splotchy red of a man with heat and wounded pride. He bowed and went, a glint of hate in his eyes that Stannis filed away without comment. The ram surged, broke, bounced back in a seesaw of men, and surged again. The hinges spat splinters like teeth. Stannis lifted his sword without thinking and rested it against his shoulder. The steel was nicked and dull, but steel was steel and truth was truth. He had said as much when he sent his letters by raven to every lord that could read, and some that could not. He had named Cersei's children for what they were, had named Tywin Lannister a traitor and a thief, had named himself unloved but rightful. He felt the truth beside him now as a blade on his neck. The door gave with a sound like a breaking bone. Stannis went forward at once as if the sound had tugged him. He climbed with the men through the broken mouth into Maegor's hold, across a floor strewn with rushes and spilled wine and a glove dropped by someone who had not thought it the last thing his hand would warm. A Kingsguard lay beneath a ragged banner, his white cloak filthy, his eyes the stunned blue of a man who had believed his color would keep him safe and discovered it was cloth. Stannis stepped over him, and in the lesser hall before the stairs, he found the woman he had come for at last. Cersei Lannister stood like a painting, pale, composed, hair a riot over one shoulder. In her hand was a little vial unstoppered, a creamy pearl of something at its lip. A boy clung to her skirt with the determination of the very young. Tommen, Stannis thought. Joffrey is elsewhere, on the walls perhaps, howling orders or wetting himself. You could not say which had been the truer kingliness in him. The Queen's mouth tilted the way it did when she thought she had later use for the thing she said. She addressed him as if they were alone, as if the hall were not full of men, as if her son were not trembling. So, she said, the rabbit dogs have run fast. Will you watch a queen drink death, Stannis? Is that among your amusements? Surrender, Stannis said. No harm will come to the boy. You will be held to answer for your crimes at trial. Trial, she said softly. By men who love you, for men who love you. By men who love the law, he said. If any can be found. He saw her eyes, quick, measure the distance between the vial and the child. Desert wind had dried her. She had been seamed by her choices, he thought. Not physically, not as the sea-marked rope, but a mark nonetheless. He could not find pity for her. Pity was for those who had known no choice. He took 3 steps and stopped just within bowshot. The poise of her back altered the smallest measure, and it told him she feared him, not for the sword, but for the thing she could not control. The law, she said again, with the sweetness of a thing to be spat. Your law. Do you think you can wash this city with it? You'll need a river larger than this one. She lifted the vial between finger and thumb as if considering whether light could pass through sin. Then she shifted it to the boy's mouth. Stannis knew the taste of killing decisions. He said, Lord Roland, without tearing his gaze from the queen, take the child. Roland Storm, the bastard of Night Song, moved like a thrown spear. The queen anticipated it and jerked, but not swiftly enough. The vial tipped and spilled poison across her palm and onto the floor to soak the rushes. Tommen bawled as Roland hauled him backward and handed him to a waiting soldier whose arms had never held a prince before. Cersei stood staring at her wet palm, lips parted. as if astonished that the last of her choices had been taken from her by mere muscles. Her face, desire stripped of hope, became small in that moment. She looked at Stannis, and all the polish left her. "You should have let me choose," she whispered. "You chose when you let your son butcher Eddard Stark," Stannis said. A sound like an oath went through the hall. Half the men there had followed Lord Eddard in Robert's day or knew a man who had. Stannis lifted his hand, and the sound died as if severed. "Ser Lancel," he said, noting the boy in Lannister golden hair and a breastplate a size too big, with a bandage showing through the finery like a betrayal. "You are my prisoner." Ser Lancel's mouth worked. He lowered his sword without the sound of steel on stone. Stannis nodded. "We go to the throne," he said, to no one and everyone. "Bring the woman, bring the boy. If Joffrey shows himself, do not kill him. He shall be tried." The throne room smelled of smoke and sweat. The Iron Throne did not shine. It loomed in the light like a shape a child had dreamed. A broken beast, all angles and cold edges. Stannis had dreamed of it once, in the manner of a man who dreams of a thing because it exists and not because he loves it. He had never thought it beautiful, and the sight of it now did not make him love it more. It is not meant to be loved, he thought. It is meant to prick. Men crowded the hall. The gold cloaks that had bent the knee kept to the walls with uncertainty scrawled across their faces. Antler men, having flung their pins, now clutched them like talismans and stared at their king as if the world were a game and in the next breath someone would shout that it was not. A pyromancer stood near the pillars in a robe that had once been wine-dark and was now gray with ash. Helene, Stannis thought. The man stared at the floor, where the soot lay in a smear of boot prints and drift. "Your Grace," Axel Florence said from behind, voice made smooth with hunger. "Take the throne." Stannis did not. He walked toward it until the points of the swords hummed at the limit of his hearing. Then he stopped and turned to the assembly. "Hear the law," he said. He spoke plain. Robert Baratheon, first of his name, had died. Joffrey, styling himself king, had ordered Lord Eddard's head, had usurped under false name, had trafficked in treason, had called Tywin Lannister and his host to the city. Cersei Lannister had conspired. He did not color it. Color was for banners. He had no gift for words and would not pretend one. When he was done, he said, "There will be a trial. I will seat my hand and my small council, and petition the High Septon to witness. Until then, they will be kept separate and guarded." "And their little monster?" someone shouted. "Tyrion, where's the imp?" There was a murmur, ugly, like rats in a wall. Stannis raised his hand and it thinned. "Find him," Stannis said. "If he is wounded, tend him. He will answer at trial with the rest." "Mercy for the imp?" Axel hissed under breath. "Justice," Stannis said, and his jaw tightened until he thought the hinge would break. Outside the city, the earth took the moonlight in its quiet way. On the Rose Road, 1,000 campfires made constellations across the dark. Tywin Lannister sat his horse on a low rise, the smell of field and iron around him, and watched the black hill with its scribble of pale walls and thought, for the first time in his life perhaps, of turning twice instead of once. Ser Kevin at his side said nothing. Word had run through the host like a bird. The city had fallen. It had fallen quickly, like a house that had been smoldering for years. Tywin measured the road as if he could carve the leagues from it with his gaze and add them to his coffers. "Loras will not be turned," Kevin said at last. Loras Tyrell was with the Outriders, visor up, face white except where fury flushed it. He stared toward the city as if he could burn it with that alone. His brother had been murdered by a shadow of Stannis' making, so the stories went. Tywin did not believe in shadows that murdered. He believed in knives held by men who could be caught. "We will not be fools," Tywin said. "We fall back to Duskendale and we sit in the chair that is nearest to hand. The boy at Highgarden must decide whether he loves his daughter more than his pride." "Mace Tyrell loves his banners," Kevin said. "Then he will count them," Tywin murmured, "and find them insufficient." The sound of the road swelled as the word passed. Horses went to bit. Wagons creaked. Men cursed in whispers because shouting admitted retreat. Loras turned his horse without orders, a brittle grace in him, and followed, a shadow of vengeance wheeled by calculation he did not make. In the cellars under the Tower of the Hand, Tyrion Lannister woke to pain shaped like a man's palm pressed forever over half his face. He opened his eyes into a red film and saw the world aslant. The torch outside his door burned like a daisy scene underwater. He swallowed and tasted the copper and rot of his own mouth. His head was wrapped, his nose clogged, his lips split. He thought of Ser Mandan's eyes, flat, pale as milk, and the angle of the sword falling and Podrick screaming, Boy's voice cracking with terror. He reached for the memory like a toy under the bed, darted away. "You," he said, and had to cough before speech returned. "You clever, loyal, wine-pouring boy." "But..." The door scraped. Varys slid in as if the air parted for him. He held a candle lantern and his powdered face shone in it like something that had once been human. He smiled as if he could hear Tyrion's thought and was kind enough not to answer it. "A lion in a cage," Varys said gently. "I brought you water. Poisoned." Tyrion croaked and took it regardless. The water was warm and tasted of wooden cup. "If I meant to poison you," Varys said with wounded pride, "it would not taste of wood." "Who has the city?" Tyrion asked, though even to his ears the question sounded like jest. Outside, the sounds were new. The rhythm of boots, the laughter, if it was laughter, different in pitch. "The man who wrote letters," Varys said. "The one who remembers names of debts. Stannis Baratheon." Tyrion shut his eyes. It did not shut out the ache. "Of course," he muttered. "He will want mine. Your debts." "My head," Tyrion said. He thought he laughed, though it hurt. "It is very small. No use to him." Varys tilted his head. He set the candle on the floor and folded himself down like a spider at prayer. "He may want your wit," he said. "I have met few kings who want such things and fewer who know how to use them. But Stannis is not a fool." "He is something worse," Tyrion said. "He is righteous." Varys smiled with eyes only. "That can be a kind of foolishness." Somewhere above the cellars a bell rang, iron, slow. It was not for a wedding. It was not for a death either. A summons. Varys rose in one smooth motion. "They will call a thing a trial," he said. "You will say clever things. They will weigh them as if words could be weighed." "You will be elsewhere," Tyrion said. "I am everywhere," Varys said, and vanished through the door with a sound like silk when silk is trying not to be heard. Davos found his way into the throne room by following the current of men. Someone recognized him. "Onion!" And there were hands on his shoulders, and he shook them off without rancor. He moved until he could see the king. Stannis stood below the throne, straight as a pike. Opposite him, on a low bench set like a scaffold, sat Cersei Lannister, unbound but with 3 spearmen around her, and Joffrey, pale with the spoiled milk of rage. The boy's mouth moved constantly, small and foul words falling from it as if he could spit his way to safety. Tommen sat apart, cheeks blotched, eyes large, hands folded in his lap like a prayer he did not know the words for. The child's legs did not reach the floor. Davos looked at him and remembered his own youngest's legs, swinging in air, heels thumping, impatient with stillness. Melisandre of Asshai stood at Stannis' shoulder like a shadow painted bright. Her hair was fire, her eyes the red of coals when wind wakes them. She wore no crown and did not need one. She was crowned in her certainty. Davos felt his stomach harden as if the sea had turned to frost in him. "Your Grace," he said, pushing forward until he was close enough to be heard. Stannis' head turned. For a heartbeat some movement passed under the skin of his face, unkingly as joy. "Davos," he said, not loud, and the hall's noise crawled down around the name. "I had you dead." "Not yet," Davos said. "The sea kept me." "The sea takes and returns at her whim," Melisandre purred. "Lawler returned you, Onion Knight." "Then I'll thank the sea," Davos said, because he could not hold his tongue in his own mouth when she was near. If the Lord of Light is as generous, he'll not miss one gratitude. Something like mirth moved across Stannis' mouth, passed and was gone. You'll live, he said to Davos, to put me right when I would be wrong. Davos said, and bowed with stiff neck. The words were too large to fit the room. They hung in the air like a sword over a bed. Later they sat in a smaller chamber where once, Davos supposed, kings had broken fast and made jests that no one would forget. The council Stannis had was a patchwork. Axel Florent flushed with thwarted devotions, the bastard of Nightsong quietly taking the measure of his sword's new weight. Maester Pylus plump and young, his chain bright, a Dragonstone man, and a reed-thin representative of the Iron Bank who had appeared like a coin balanced on a windowsill. Eyes narrow, manner neat, name Tycho something that did not matter. Varys slid in and out, smiling his small, sad smile, the mummer who did not applaud. Davos thought of a net with music strung along each knot. The city is hungry, Pylus said, with the earnestness of one who believes facts can be arranged as bread. We have 2 days' grain if we stretch it thin. The pyromancer's stores are less, Stannis interrupted, and for a moment Davos saw that he had learned to count as men learn to pray, in crisis and at the side of someone who can. The fleets are lost. Not all, said a voice from the door. Salador San leaned in it like a cat in a sun patch. His rings winked. His smile did not. You owe me men and ships, my king. It is a very expensive thing to watch a city burn from the wrong water. You'll be paid, Stannis said. Salador's eyebrows went up. In what? In coin, Stannis said, and tea. And his head toward the envoy without moving anything else. In coin. The Bravosi inclined his head by a fractional degree. His Grace will find the Iron Bank a faithful friend, he murmured. When his Grace is faithful to his ledgers. Davos wondered if these were the same thing. He did not like the idea that kings and numbers could be made so alike they shared a word. Yet he had seen a boy die because he counted his steps wrong going up a wet ladder. Miscounting killed as surely as blades. We will not starve the city, Stannis said. We will not sack it. Any man caught looting will be hanged. The antler men will be rewarded. Your Grace, Axel put in. If we light the Great September, the people will KN. The Great September does not burn, Stannis snapped, and the Red Woman's eyes cooled a degree. The Seven can stand unmolested. The High Septon will be invited to witness the trials. I will have the realm, not a ruin. Law and light, Melisandre said softly, smile cutting, are most beautiful together. Davos's hands closed under the table. He thought of the wooden gods burning on Dragonstone's ridge, the way the night had looked without them. He thought of the sea indifferent and perfect. Robb Stark, Roland Storm said. If he is still king in the north, he must be relieved of it. Sansa Stark is here. A letter might be written to. Robb Stark holds Jaime Lannister, Stannis said. He may name a price. I will hear it, if it is not folly. Your Grace, Davos said. The king's gaze swung. The boy does no wrong being named by his men. He is strong in the Riverlands. The Freys are with him today, but their hearts are always counting rooms. Tywin Lannister lives and breathes and thinks. He will work mischief with any man who can be bought. If you would weaken both at once, offer the North its name for peace. Make him your bannerman for all other wars. Axel made a sound like a dog choking on a bone. Treason. It is arithmetic, Davos said. Stannis' jaw worked. He stared at the table as if numbers were etched in the wood. His hand came up and rubbed his temple as if the iron in his head pressed there. I will consider it, he said at last. He will not bend, Axel said, livid. You cannot offer such. I will consider it, Stannis said again, and in the repetition was a thing that made other men close their mouths. They brought Tyrion up 2 days later when the smoke had thinned into a gray taste on the tongue and bread had begun to appear in flea bottom at prices that did not require fingers. He had walked once around his cell each night and day to persuade his body it still did a circle of the world. When the guards came, he made a joke and they did not laugh. He was set on a bench with his head high because it hurt less that way, and he made his face careful because that hurt less too, and he lifted his chin at Cersei because it hurt her. Joffrey stared at him as if the swollen face were an insult on top of insults. The High Septon, a great bell of flesh in cloth of gold, sat sweating and outraged on a throne that had been moved in from somewhere less grand. He watched as if he had been asked to bless a butcher's work and found it offends his nostrils. "This is not canonical," he said at one point, and Stannis gave him a look that wrote new canon on stone. Ser Lancel, pale, confirmed that he had lain with the queen because the queen had asked him in a voice he could not refuse. A wet-eyed serving girl murmured that she had carried messages between brother and sister because it had been her duty, and because if she had refused, there were no duties after refusing. Maester Pycelle, hair limp as tallow, stammered that he had delivered moon tea to the queen. And there was a book, brought by Varys with both hands as if it were the heart of a whale and might burst, Robert's book, of the lineages of the great houses, the careful, dry tally of hair and eye and seed. It said, in its way, that black begets black when left to its own company. It said what Ned Stark had said before he lost his head, that a golden boy cannot be born of black and black. It was a boring book and a terrible one. Cersei listened as if each word were a pebble dropped in a well whose depth she would test with her body. Tyrion watched her and found a part of him he had not known remained. Too small to be called pity, too bitter to be called sympathy, something like recognition. Joffrey spat as if he could drown all books. At the end of it, Stannis rose without flourish. "Joffrey Waters," he said, and if there was any cruel pleasure in naming the boy that way, it was buried deep and given no air. "You are found guilty of usurpation and the murder of Lord Eddard Stark. You are stripped of all titles. You are sentenced to death." Joffrey's mouth opened to scream and his mother's hand shot as if it could stop fate. "Please," she said to no one. The word fell to the floor and lay there. "Cersei Lannister," Stannis said, "you are found guilty of incest, treason, and the conspiracy that made a bastard king. You are stripped of all titles. You will be held until I determine your sentence." "Mercy," the High Septon began, but Stannis did not look at him. He nodded to Roland Storm. It was done in the yard, not before the Iron Throne. The blade was bright and honest. The boy had to be carried. His legs would not make him go. Tyrion thought he could still smell wildfire, though there was none, and taste ash, though the day was clear. He found himself staring at Tommen instead. The child stood between two guards, fists balled, face wet, looking at the world as if it had revealed itself a liar. The headsman's sword rose and fell. A sound like a wire pulled too tight snapped through the yard. Cersei did not make a sound. She folded slowly, as if she had chosen at last to sit. They wrapped the boy's head and set it on a spike because this was a city and cities taught by sight. It did not look like a boy because it was swaddled. Tyrion thought that was mercy and wondered at himself. In the days that followed, the city changed the way a face does after illness. Boards came down from some doors. Others went up. The gold cloaks moved in pairs. Bread was counted. The great September rang its bells again, sullenly, but they rang. The little court assembled. Pylus with his careful notes, Axel glowering over every mention of the seven, Tycho Nestoris measuring coin with the air of a man who weighed seasons, Salador chaffering, Varys smiling as if at a story he had known since birth. Sansa Stark walked the eastern terrace, where the wind off the bay brought salt and cooled her in the late afternoons, and learned again how to walk without keeping her shoulders tense in expectation of a hand. She saw Tommen once, in a passage with a maid and a guard. He stopped and bowed like a child who had been told what to do and then fled, face burning. Sansa stood with her fingers pressed against the stone until they hurt. She did not know whether to pity him, and the knowledge that she did not know felt like a small steel thing placed on her palm. Stannis visited her on that terrace. He loomed not because he was tall, but because he had learned how to carry weight. He stood with his hands behind him and looked at the water. The sea made innocent by distance, through little flashes at the light. "Lady Sansa," he said, "you are Eddard Stark's daughter. I knew your father." She did not ask in what manner. "Your Grace." I would send you home, he said, and the wind lifted and laid his hair. Write to your brother. Tell him I will make peace on terms that the law will approve. If he bends the knee and yields the title he has taken, he may keep the north. He will be warden, and his people will be called what they have always been called in their hearts. He will rise when I call the banners, when the realm is threatened. But his men will not bleed in my quarrels for pride. Sansa felt her heart make a strange motion. A little hope is a dangerous thing. It moves as a disease does. He will not bend easily, she said. Men do not bend easily, Stannis agreed. But they bend for winter. Tell him that winter is not a word. Tell him I have taken a city for the realm and I will not spend the realm in taking another. Tell him a king can make a treaty and keep it. He turned his head at last. His eyes were pale as salt. She thought he had not slept in many nights. I will write, she said. He nodded. Your father would have liked that you think before you speak, he said, and left her in a wind that had cooled a measure. That night Davos climbed the steps of the Tower of the Hand with a paper in his fist and the certainty that he would be called a fool. He knocked and was told to enter and found Stannis alone. Sleeves rolled, hair damp from water thrown on his eyes to keep them open. The Red Woman was absent and the room seemed bigger for it. This came from the wall, Davos said. He held it out. From Maester Aemon and Lord Commander Mormont. They ask bread and men. They say the wildlings gather on the other side in numbers like nets full to breaking. Stannis took it. He read with his mouth tight and his hand going to his temple twice without his leave. When he was done, he did not put the letter down. He stared at it as if it might change if looked at sternly enough. The wall, he said. Aye, the wall is not the realm, Stannis said, and put the paper down as if it were water and he were not thirsty. The wall is a line of stone and old songs. If I march from the city now, Tywin will make again what I have unmade. The Tyrells will sow their green banners like weeds. The realm is not defended by leaving its heart. Begging your pardon, Davos said, and he felt his throat knot like rope under weight. But the realm is defended by defending the realm. The heart is no good if the blood is gone. They say there are darker things beyond the wildlings. They say dead men walk. He had thought it foolish too the first time he said it aloud. He did not look away. The king stared at him a long time. Then he went to the window. The city sprawled below, ungentle and unlovely and alive. The moon picked out the river like a blade laid down. Melisandre has said such things? Stannis said finally, as if admitting a debt and finding it payable. She tells me of winter like a person. She has never told me of bread. She tells you truths, Davos said, and did not know whose side he took saying it. And uses them. Men do that. I do that. But there are truths that don't care. The cold will not ask who wears a crown. The cold is a sea without harbors. Stannis' shoulders moved. A small, tired lift. Tywin, he said. The debt. The Tyrells. The small folk. The seven. If I march, they snarl and slip the leash. Leave me to hold them, Davos said, and surprised himself. He had never imagined the words in his mouth. Name me hand. I have 2 hands worth of sense, even if one is shorter. I'll keep them in their places. I'll count the bread. I'll count the guards. I'll keep the queen safe in her cell and the boy safe in his chamber. I'll see your daughter safe when you send for her. Go north and do the thing only a king can do. Silence in the room was a third person with them. Stannis turned at last and looked at Davos as if he were a map. There is a point on a map where you must go whether you love it or not. Stannis' mouth twitched in the ghost of a smile that might once have belonged to Robert, if Robert had been made of iron instead of wine. You'll make enemies by morning, he said. I have them already, Davos said. They don't know my name yet. Stannis crossed to him. He unpinned the clasp at his throat. Plain, old steel shaped like a hand. Then they can learn it, he said. The next days were teeth and ticking. Tycho Nestoris scratched columns. The Iron Bank pledged coin to a king who did not promise without intending to keep. Varys promised little and delivered much. The High Septon blustered and then agreed to bless what could be blessed. Axel Florent smiled the fixed smile of a man who would sooner see a sept burn than a king bend. Salador-san sailed and came back with flour and a new list of prices as long as the Rose Road. The ravens went. Sansa wrote with her head bent, hair veiling her face, a script neat and plain. Robb Stark's answer came like cold water. He would speak. The boy had written with a hand steadier than the realm. Tyrion Lannister, face mending in a shape that would never be pretty, found a kind of purchase in counting. Davos discovered him bent over tax rolls with a look of intense disdain and intense attention together, and thought, unexpectedly, of a man joining a frayed rope and a damaged rope because together they make a stronger line. "I don't love you," Tyrion informed him without preface. "Your king has the stiffness of a man who has never made anyone laugh and fears he will die of it." "If he dies, it won't be of laughter," Davos said. "No," Tyrion agreed. "It will be of duty. That disease is catching." "You'll keep the ledgers straight," Davos said, ignoring the flicker of surprise on the imp's face that he had not been threatened first. "You'll keep your jests for when they purchase bread. You'll stay under guard, and when you can be trusted to walk in daylight, you'll do it. The law is the law." "Gods, you sound like him," Tyrion said, and his grin, bent, bright, human, split his mending face. "Very well, Lord Hand. Let us make the city something even Tywin Lannister couldn't overcharge. And when your king goes to the wall to throw his stern looks at snow, we shall keep him a realm to return to." Cersei sat her cell like a shrine abandoned. She had a brazier that smoked. It made the stones sweat. The women who tended her did not speak much. She did not ask. Stannis came once and looked at her with a gaze so flat it did not even accuse. "You could have been a queen," he said. "I was," she answered. "A lawful one," he said. She laughed once, a bark without mirth. "There are no lawful queens," she said. "There are only women with crowns." "Not anymore," he said, as if calm could be a cruelty, and left her to the smell of old smoke. In the Great September, the High Septon lifted his hands and pronounced Stannis Baratheon rightful. Words dragged from him by need and fear, and a sense that if the city was to be a city, it must have a king within it. Melisandre stood at the back and watched like a cat that has let a bird fly so that the catching will be sweeter. Davos watched her and watched the candles, their little honest flames, and knew that whatever men named sanctified, fire would eat without compunction. He held the thought like a charm against later. In the yard, the men were mustering. Stannis wore plain black, the crown that had been Robert's bent to his brow as if it had been meant for an older, leaner skull. He looked north while men spoke at his shoulder, and Davos knew the moment when the king's mind left the city. A wind came off the bay and kissed his cheek with salt. He went to the boy king who was not a king and knelt. "Tommen," he said, and spoke as a father to a son not his. "You will be safe. Your mother will be held and will answer when I return. You will be taught letters and law. You will learn the names of the men who build the city. If you can say their names, you will not fear them." Tommen nodded, lips pressed tight, looking up as if hope were a ceiling he had once been taller than. Sansa watched from a gallery and felt a weight shift inside her. Nothing so neat as forgiveness, nothing so lovely as relief, something like space. Stannis mounted. He did not make a speech. He was not a man of words. He lifted his hand and the column began to move, a long, armored creature, the sound of its passage like rain drawn out. The city poured into the streets to watch. Whether to jeer or cheer or count was hard to tell. The banners moved like slow fish. Davos rode at his side a little to the rear, because that is where the hand stands when the king rides, and behind them came fewer men than the songs like, and enough to matter if the songs were wrong. They went by the Great September. Its steps thronged, and Melisandre laughed softly at the sight of saints carved in stone looking down on a king who did not bow. They went by the market where the first of the new bread lay stacked, brown and homely as virtue. They went by the mud gate still scorched and repaired, where the chain had not choked them because chains break when men refuse to be caught. They went past the harbor where the sea counted ships. Salador San's flagship hung a little apart, proud as a woman who had not yet been wooed to marriage. He touched 2 fingers to his brow as they passed, which was his way of bowing without making a habit of it. At the last, on the city's edge, Stannis turned in his saddle and looked back. The Red Keep found its proper size against the sky when you saw it from the road. It was formidable, and it was only stone. He inclined his head to it as one might to a troublesome relative. His gaze moved once to the eastern terrace where a slight figure stood, hair unbound. He could not have sworn it was Eddard Stark's daughter. All women looked like small sorrows on a height from that distance. He looked away to the north as if there were a magnet in his skull. Davos followed the gaze and tasted cold in his mouth that had nothing to do with air. "Law?" Stannis said, not loudly, as if reminding himself of a word he had married. "Bread. The wall." "Aye," Davos said, "in that order and all together. It is a long road." "The sea is longer," Davos said. They started north. Behind them the city drew breath and the bells went on ringing, not for joy, but from habit. The old, stubborn habit of people whose lives are made of days and flour. In a cell, Cersei Lannister lifted her head and listened to the roll of drums like footfalls never coming to her door. In a counting room, Tyrion Lannister set his quill and calculated how many loaves a man could bake with the coin a cell sale asked for, and wondered if he would ever be thanked for understanding that numbers had tempers. In Sunspear, a young princess played at court with shells and was told gently that the wind had veered in King's Landing. On the Rose Road, Tywin Lannister studied a fly and wondered how to make it walk toward him without scaring it away. In the halls of Highgarden, an old woman, who had been young when men sang different songs, put a sprig of rosemary between her teeth and considered a king who did not dance for music. In the Frostfang's manse, Rhaegar watched ravens rise and knew in his bones that winter had found a champion of its own, choosing among the southern kings. By river and ridge and under star they went, the king and his fewer-than-a-legend host, and in their going the tale that would be told later began to take its first true shape. A hard man with a jaw like iron and a hand with half its fingers, a red woman whose eyes held campfire and prophecy, a set of ledgers balanced like swords, a girl on a terrace who wrote a letter home not knowing whether the word home would still mean the same thing when she arrived, a boy with a crown learning the weight of his skull without it, a city that ate and slept and worked, as cities do when kings pass like weather over them. In the north, where the air bit and the trees learned to bend or break, men who had never cared about thrones saw banners they did not know and spat and went on making fires larger than they had made last winter. The wall rose ahead in the king's mind long before it rose ahead in the road. White as a truth a man does not want and he'll hold to anyway. On a night like a blade honed thin, Stannis stood with Davos on a ridge where the world opened and the sky arched so close the stars felt like nails in a black board, and he said, "If I burn, it will not be for want of wind." And Davos, who had always known that the sea and the cold keep their own counsels and no men's prayers can teach them mercy, said, "Aye, your grace," and drew his cloak close and thought of onion boats through moonless coves, and counted the ways a man could be brave when no song would ever call it that.